People, but good evening and welcome to our second free workshop on preventive defense. My name is Sandy Lieberman, and we are thrilled to have you guys all tonight. I wanted to start with a simple question. When you think of self-defense, what comes to mind? For most people, it's a flash of action, a block, a strike, a physical confrontation. It's what we call hard skills, and JJ's going to talk a lot more about that in just a little bit. But what we've learned is that the most dangerous fight is the one you never saw coming. And every day people walk into avoidable situations, deserted parking garages, an escalating argument, all sorts of things that we'll see and we'll just ignore and just keep walking towards it. And those are some of the things that soft skills will entail. And Steve Tarani will go into greater detail about that. Tonight, guys, like I mentioned, we've got three amazing experts who live and breathe all of this. They're here to pull back the curtains on a side of self-protection that many people just do not know too much about and oftentimes just flat out ignore. First, we're going to hear from Steve Tarani, a globally recognized expert in protective services and the architect behind the concept of preventive defense. Steve will introduce you to the framework of soft skills and explain why they are the most critical tools in your safety arsenal. Then we're going to have JJ, a veteran law enforcement professional and a decorated martial artist. JJ will bridge the gap between soft and hard skills, explain when physical readiness is necessary and how it fits into a complete layered defense strategy. And lastly, we have Stephen Lieberman, a distinguished attorney specializing in self-defense law. Stephen will illuminate the serious legal consequences that follow us after any use of force situation, reinforcing why the most effective strategy is always to avoid the fight altogether. Guys, we are going to give you an opportunity to ask your questions at the end of the evening. In fact, we're going to dedicate, I think, about 10 to 15 minutes at the very, very end for those Q&As, and I will have the ability to unmute you so that you can ask the questions personally. And then I have the ability, as we've been talking about earlier, to play God and disable the talking mode from you in order to keep moving forward. We are going to be spending literally 1 hour on this topic. And as you may or may not know, this is a precursor to our big two-day event in April. And we've got an entire 8-hour day dedicated to this entire concept. All right, guys, so what you're about to hear tonight, it's not about fear. It's about empowerment. It's about trading anxiety for awareness. Over the next hour, our speakers will challenge your perspectives and give you practical insights that you can apply the moment you sign off tonight. This is your opportunity to learn how to become a hard target, not through force, but through foresight. So please, give your full attention as we begin this crucial conversation. Let's start by welcoming our first speaker, Steve Tarani.
Thank you, Sandy, and thank you everyone for making the time to be on board with us here tonight. So I'm going to start off with my block, which is the soft skills component, and I like to make a differentiation from what most of us see as a bodyguard versus a protective services professional. So let me describe a bodyguard. You qualify as a bodyguard if you are 6'5", 300 pounds of hardened muscle and can punch somebody in the face and have a gun, maybe. Okay, cool. That's a bodyguard. Check. Then a protective services professional. That is someone who's been through multiple academies, who is trained in protective intelligence, surveillance, counter surveillance, technical surveillance, countermeasures, proactive measures, etc. It's an extensive skill set. So I'm going to leave the bodyguard thing off to the side here for a bit and focus on the protective service professional. That person needs to know two very large groups of information. And the first group is what we call soft skills. The second group is hard skills. So JJ is going to get more into the hard skills side, but just real briefly, it's such things as defensive driving, firearms, hand-to-hand, that kind of thing. The soft skills entails situational awareness, threat detection, preventive measures, proactive measures, things like that. Well, hard skills are absolutely crucial. You can't have one or the other. You have to know both to be an effective protective services professional. But the stress is on the soft skills, because if you fail your soft skills, then you have no other choice but to go into your hard skills. Real world scenario, I was getting ready for a deployment, and you have this thing called a pre-deployment briefing, and we had Papa Smurf up there, and he was giving us the whole, before you go to this country, and etc. And he said something I never forgot: if you boys go to guns, you failed. If you got to use your hard skills, you failed. Not just a little bit, you failed miserably. He looked at having hard skills such as firearm, hand to hand, things like that. He looked at that as the lifeboats on the Titanic. He said, how about, guys, if you look for an iceberg, and if you find an iceberg, then drive around it. But if you fail to look for the iceberg, this is your soft skills, right? Fail to see the iceberg, fail to drive around the iceberg. Then do you need to know how to use the lifeboats, which is your hard skills? The answer is yes. But failing your soft skills, you're left with no other choice but the hard skills. To acquire these skills, the professionals go through a tremendous amount of training, very rigorous, specialized academies, substantial documented training hours. You have to go through qualifications, et cetera, to ensure proficiency on the job. They're very perishable. JJ is going to get more into this in a little bit. However, as a civilian, you're not required to operate under those same rigid frameworks. You're not required to perform in weeks of intensive training or proficiency or annual examinations, qualifications, anything like that. You have a choice. You have a choice to either be proactive or reactive. That's the difference between the two right now. A lot of people say, I got my secret ninja move. I'm going to poke him in the eye with my thumb. I'm going to punch him in the throat. Then I'm going to kick him right in the groin. That's my secret ninja move, and I'm going to do that. Well, you're setting yourself up to be reactive. In other words, that's my first response. There's another option there. You don't need to only use the hammer when you can use your soft skills. And that's what the focus of this part of our training is about. Choosing to be reactive, it puts you in a position where you're waiting for danger to strike before responding. It puts you at the back of the action-reaction power curve as opposed to the front of it. Alternatively, you can opt to be proactive and embrace the superior strategy, which is your soft skills. Hard skills requires years and years, maybe more, of preparation before you can actually use it. And soft skills, you can use it.
Oh, did we just lose Steve?
I think that's...
Let's look at a comparison. We can use our reactive measures or proactive measures. It's your choice again. So if you're reactive, that's a hard skill, and you need your body for that. The split second you use your body in a real world altercation, you introduce what's called a scale of injury. At the bottom, there's no injury. You walked away from a fight without a scratch, or a minor injury, like you need a Band-Aid, or a recoverable injury, broken arm or something like that. Unrecoverable injury, that's the next level up. And then the highest is DRT, dead right there. That's the scale of that's the scale of injury that you introduce when you go to your hard skills. There's another column there, and that's the liability column, which Stephen will get into. And there's two. There's criminal liability and civil liability, which you'll hear a little bit more about later. Your other choice, as opposed to being reactive, is being proactive. Now, proactive is all about the soft skills, where you use your mind, which is your most powerful weapon. It doesn't need batteries. You don't have to recharge it with a USB port. Most people have one. It incurs no injury whatsoever. And in the liability column, zero. No liability. Let me think about this. If I choose to go reactive, I got to learn hard skills, use my body, incur injury, potentially face criminal civil liability. But if I'm proactive, place myself ahead of the reaction power curve. I utilize my soft skills using my most powerful weapon, incur no injury and no liability. To me, that's not really a difficult choice. Soft skills carry no risks at all. They allow you to maintain control of the situations, avoid harm, protect yourself and others. Every time you successfully apply your soft skills, the likelihood of ever needing your hard skills significantly diminishes. Training to be proactive enables you to predict and prevent undesired events. How would you like to have that skill in your tool set? To be able to predict and prevent undesired events. It's something I highly recommend. It puts you ahead of the power curve. Soft skills are the ultimate use of force alternative. And I like to make a comparison between the two, a comparison between your soft skills and your hard skills. Soft skills are proactive, hard skills are reactive. Soft skills weaponize your mind, whereas hard skills weaponize your body. Soft skills incur no liability. Hard skills incur civil and criminal liability. Soft skills incur no physical injury, zero. Hard skills introduce physical injury. Soft skills are your number one use of force alternative. Number one, it comes before anything else. You can hear it, see it, smell it coming. And then, of course, hard skills is exactly use of force. Soft skills keep you at the front of the action-reaction power curve, whereas hard skills kick you to the back of that curve in reaction. If you apply your soft skills, you maintain control. If you choose to go reactive and with your hard skills, that requires you to attempt to gain control. In other words, you've given up control. Soft skills doesn't require any physical training whatsoever. Hard skills requires you to be on the mat, rolling around on the ground, getting to the range, to keep your skills, to sustain your skills. It takes time. Soft skills are immediately applicable, where hard skills, let's say you just learned a skill on Monday. Well, can you use it on the street tomorrow? Even your secret ninja move, how many times have you actually poked somebody in the eye, punched them in the throat, and then kicked them in the groin? I'd like to talk about one last important factor before I hand it over to JJ, and that is, in any violent physical altercation, you are afforded only two commodities, and those are time and opportunity. That's it. There's only two. When you apply your soft skills, that affords you the maximum amount of time and the maximum amount of opportunity. You can see something happening from across the street or across a room or down the hallway or whatever. You can see it, gives you plenty of time to react to it, to move here, move there. The A answer, of course, is avoidance, right? The basic thing is, if you don't show up for a mugging, you can't get mugged. So on the software side, on the soft skills side, you have optimal time and plenty of opportunity to solve the tactical problem. On the hard skills side, JOJ will get into this a little deeper, you have significantly reduced your time. Now you're behind the curve. You have to immediately respond in a matter of seconds, whereas you had a matter of minutes or maybe hours. With your soft skills, it's reduced to seconds or tenths of a second. And you have only one opportunity, and that's to fight your way out. So let's make a comparison. Soft skills, plenty of time, plenty of opportunity to solve the tactical problem. Hard skills, reduced amount of time, literally under a second, and very minimal opportunity, in fact, only one, to fight your way off the X. Ultimately, soft skills, they are superior to your hard skills in every way that matters, realistically. They protect without harm and prevent without conflict. It's one of my favorite quotes: protect without harm, prevent without conflict. Imagine having that in your toolkit. And they can be developed without the need for lifelong retraining. Once you learn these skills, they stay with you. I mean, how do you lose an idea, right? For both professionals and civilians alike, the real mastery lies not in the reactive hard skills, but in the proactive, adaptable, and highly effective realm of soft skills. I'm going to turn it over to JJ for the other side of this coin, which is hard skills.
All
JJ.
right. Thank you, Mr. Tarani. Hello, everyone. Welcome back again. Now, my favorite part is going over hard skills, right? I like to grind. I like to always learn new skills, right? And I like to set the goal and get good at those skills. Now, but hard skills have characteristics that we have to understand that. One is teachable. It means you need to find the right skill set that you want to learn, and you go find the right person that knows what is doing, and you can go learn that skill, right? And you can also measure it. You can measure your skill set. For example, me, I would like to, let's say, I want to be able to draw my weapon from concealment at 1.5 seconds and be able to get an accurate shot on a target. I can measure that, right? I can test my skill set to see where I'm at in this hard skill. It's job specific. It means you can find a goal that I want to be able to get good at hands-on combat, right? Or less lethal weapons or impact weapons, firearms, anything that you feel like fits your lifestyle to get good at self-defense, right? You can have a specific skill set, you can target it and you work for it. Like Mr. Tarani was talking about, it's something that you need the patience for. You cannot gain that in a quick time, fast. It takes years to establish good forms and techniques. You all heard about muscle memory, right? To your mindset, your body adjusts with that skill set to be able to do it fast and correctly, right? And it takes years to do it. That's why, unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that patience or they don't have that dedication. And somewhere in that journey, they just give up. And some people continue that, and you see the progress, and you see they getting a very high level of performance. Now, you can also demonstrate it. For example, in our live fire classes, I always demonstrate the course of fire for my students. I never explain them what I want from them to do. I always demonstrate at that point they understand what the standard I'm expecting them to perform and what they need to do. Then I will ask questions, right? Again, these are good things about hard skills. When you find a good training group, they can go over those characteristics of the hard skills and you can learn it in the right way. Now, what type of the hard skills for self-defense, right? Now, before we have to go over a few things. You have to be real and honest, right? Your age is going to matter. Gender is going to matter. Size of the person is going to matter, right? Usually males are more muscular. Muscle means more power. Power means more force, right? That's just a fact, right? Don't believe what you see in movies, right? And a small person throwing a very big person across the hallway or room. That's not the reality is, right? And you also have to be honest about your mental condition, right? And also your physical condition. Mentally, are you prepared, right? Are you mentally prepared to do some violent act to protect yourself, right? If someone using a force against me, I have to come up with a counter force, right? To overcome that force, right? Probably got to go to the higher force in order to overcome that force that's coming towards me, right? It means I have to be willing to do that violent act, right? And physically, am I prepared for that? Now, my medical condition, my age, all those things can affect on what things it can do, right? Now, let's talk about martial arts. I did about 20 years of martial arts experience. I had the opportunity to be twice in part of national teams, and I did a lot of different ones. And I know there are some scam out there, right? You have to do your research and what type of martial arts you want to go practice to learn some self-defense, right? Not every martial arts can be used as a self-defense, right? Some of them are striking, some of them are about and hands-on and grappling. You have to see what is the right thing for you. probably striking is not the best of the self-defense, in my opinion. Be able to control the person's movement and balance is more effective. I'm a big fan of grappling style of martial arts like wrestling, jiu-jitsu, gi, no gi, sambo, Russian style of martial arts. These are the ones that you able to control that person's balance and movement, right? I do like to know how to strike. Even I don't recommend anyone to punch without any protection, because you have a very high possibility, if you're not having a right fist, you breaking your fingers or knuckles. There's a very high possibility for that. These are the reality. Don't think like if you just punch something without gloves or wrap, you're gonna be okay and you're gonna just walk away. Not gonna, and that's not the reality. You're gonna get your hands injured. Now, how often are you going to practice that martial arts? Let's say you find the right style of martial arts, right? And you say, I'm going to sign up. This is a great training group that I found, a great coach. Now, how often are you going to put that time, right? Uh, we're busy with our work, family. How often you're going to practice is also very important, because it comes down to that consistency in your training. If you're just practicing once a month or twice a month, I think is a very honest thing to say. You shouldn't expect that much from that martial arts or that self-defense style that you're practicing, right? Again, hardest skills needs to practice constantly. If we don't practice, is a partial skill, you will get rusty. You lose some of that skill set. For example, if I don't practice my firearms training for like a month, when I go back to it, I do see the difference, right? It's just like you do a mile run in 5 minutes. You're very proud of yourself. You said, "Oh, I did a great job. I ran a mile in 5 minutes." Now you stop training for like a whole month, and you go back to it. You want to do a mile run in 5 minutes. I don't think you can do that in 5 minutes. And if you do it, you're gonna be hurting big time, right? That's why it's very important to go over those things. Now, besides martial arts, let's talk about less lethal weapons. That's something that laws become very important, because every state have different way of view of less lethal weapons. Some states, certain less lethal weapons are legal. In some states, not legal. You have to be careful, not just buying anything online and use it. And my boss, Steven, is going to go over that. I want to quickly go over OCS spray. That's one of the things I do like to have. Again, with a very small investment, you can get the civilian version, which is a small can that you don't need to have any type of permit for it. And I do like pepper gel, because a heavier liquid, and even in the closed environment, you spray someone, is not going to come back to you, or even the wind is coming towards your direction, is not going to come back to you. Why I know that? Because I had that experience working as a deputy inside the maximum security jail, right? I got pepper sprayed multiple times because I accidentally got it sprayed, or wind brought it back to me. Again, pepper gel, in my opinion, is a better option. But again, there is no guarantee on these tools, right? You can see sometimes you pepper spray people and they still function under that pain. And pepper gel is good. Have it in your pocket, keychain. If you're not the person that you would like to conceal carry firearms, it is a great tool to create a pause, distraction, to be able to create distance and get out of that environment. I'm not going to use a pepper gel or pepper spray to fight the person. I'm using this tool to create a pause or distraction to get out of there, right? I don't want to continue fighting that person. Stun gun or taser, right? Those are other tools that you can use, but again, you have to practice. Even the pepper spray, there are training ones that you need to be able to, how fast you can deploy it, right? It's not just putting in your purse, in your car, in your pocket. You think, oh, I'm good to go. How often you practicing, how fast you can reach for that pepper spray. Make sure you're aiming it at your target and you're getting a good accuracy from deploying that pepper spray, right? You have to practice it, just like any other tool. A stun gun. Problem with the stun gun, you have to be very close to that person. I would like to have distance, right? Distance buys me time. Taser is a better option, but the problem is you have to make sure the darts are connecting with the target. At that point, is effective. Other than that, it doesn't have any effect on your target. and more layer of clothing than they're wearing is going to be more problem for us at that point. Now, impact weapons. Impact weapons could be Kubotan, stick, or anything that you can use, right? Some of the impact weapons could be on the category illegal weapons in your state. Again, you have to do your research before getting those things. Same as pepper spray. Don't get your hands on MK3 or MK9 and you walk around using, because those are not law for civilians. You have to be certified security officer or peace officer in your state to be able to get those pepper sprays. Kubotan impact weapons is the same thing. But be honest with you, you can make anything to impact weapon. I can use my pen as impact weapon. You know, how you use it then is going to be different when you're going to get investigated on that. Again, Steven's going to go over those things more. Knife. That's something that most of us carry in our pocket for different purposes, right? Usually opening box, or people just have it as a tool on them, right? But it can be used as a self-defense tool, right? When I'm facing that imminent threat that my life is in danger of getting seriously bodily harm or death, I'm gonna use that reasonable force to stop that person. That reasonable force could be just my hands or any tool around me that can stop that imminent threat, right? Again, knife. Also, you have to be careful with what type of knife you're using, right? Every state, they have different rules on how they view knife or knives or blades. You have to be careful with that. Now, let's talk about firearms. It's my favorite tool, right? I spend most of my training on firearms, and I love this skill set. It's a God-given right that we have in this country, and hopefully it's going to stay for forever, as long as the United States of America exists. Now, firearms. Now, what's the purpose of the firearm? Is that for home defense or is it for concealed carry, right? If it's for concealed carry, you have to get the right amount of training and you have to get the right firearm for self-defense. Now, what's the right firearms for self-defense? I always tell people there's two things in self-defense firearms. There is comfort, there is performance. You cannot have both of them. You have to pick one that is more important to you. Some people say, I'm going over comfort. Okay, then you're probably going to go buy a smallest firearm as possible you can find in the market, and you can pretty much pocket holster it, right? But when it comes down to performance, don't expect that much from that firearm. Why? Because that firearm is so small, you don't have enough real estate to have a good grip, have a good control on that firearm, right? Now, me personally, I like performance. I don't need to be comfort. I don't want to be comfortable when I'm carrying firearms. I always want to have that reminder with me that I'm still carrying a weapon, right? I don't want to be too comfortable that I forget I'm carrying a gun, right? Now, I always tell people, go with the biggest gun that you can hide, right? Now, you have to see. For example, for me, I'm not a big person, right? I go with based on what type of clothing I wear when I'm at work, when I'm in public, based on my body type, lifestyle, right? I will find the right weapon that I can perform with it, and I can also conceal carry, right? And I can hide it. It's not gonna print out in the public when I'm walking around. Everybody gonna know that, oh, this guy is concealed carrying a weapon. Again, doesn't matter which type of these weapons you're going to go. You're going to stick with martial arts. You're going to go with less lethal weapons. You're going to go with firearms, because everybody's a little bit different. Some people are saying that no matter what, I don't like to use firearms. Okay, then you might going to be okay with less lethal weapons. Get some training with that. You might say, no, I don't want to do that. Okay, then your next option is to have some experience with the hands-on combat, right? And what type of martial arts you want to practice. Eventually, you have to get right amount of training, and 1 hour training is not going to solve your problem. Just like Mr. Tarani said, if you get 1 hour training on Monday, it doesn't mean on Tuesday you can use that training, right? Whatever you do, try to keep things simple, because at that point it's easy to remember, easy to apply, and easy to practice. You don't want to get the training that as soon as you walk out of that school or that facility, 75% of that trainings go out of the window because they were so complicated, right? You have to do your research. You have to find the right place that gives you that training. And at the end, main responsibility is on you to practice with that skill set all the time and constantly practicing over and over and over to build that hard skills, right? There's a reason we call it hard skills because it's very hard to establish this skill set. Now, at this point, I'm gonna pass to my boss, Stephen Lieberman. Sir.
Thank you so much, JJ. And Steve, it's always good to see you there in the desert. And Sandy, thank you so much for helping to really create this platform for us to be able to do this. Um, uh, Guys, so for most of you probably already know this, and might be one of the reasons why you're on this lecture tonight. Steve Tarani and we co-wrote a book together called The Sword and Quill. And it's, in fact, Sandy's holding it up in the camera right now. It really dives into a concept of what we call mastery at skill at arms, something that JJ was really focusing in on, understanding the realities, the necessity to truly become a master at skill at arms. The other side of that coin is professionalism at arms. The idea that we are operating in what is essentially a philosophical environment. So, my goal, and not just talking about the law, and for full disclosure, since many of you are from other parts of the United States, I am licensed to practice law in California. I am also licensed to practice law in the District of Columbia. If you happen to be listening to me from a state other than those two, be advised that what I am not providing you today is legal advice in your state. I am merely stating some general legal and philosophical opinions. All right, that's my protecting my ass from the bar right now. All right, with that being said, I actually do want to start off actually talking about philosophy. So when Tarani was discussing the concept of soft skills, he was really talking about what I would refer to as pre-combative experiences. These are sort of, orchestrating your life on a daily basis for the purpose of being able to detect and ultimately avoid finding yourself in a violent confrontation. And as Steve said, if you go to guns, you've lost. Essentially, you have already missed the opportunities to avoid conflict. Now, assuming you have in fact missed those opportunities, we do have sort of a threshold affirmative defense to a charge of a brandishing or assault with a deadly weapon or potentially even manslaughter. We ask ourselves, is it objectively reasonable to believe that there was an imminent likelihood of death or great bodily injury? Assuming the answer to that question is yes, you are now authorized to use the requisite level of force necessary to prevent that death or injury from potentially happening to you. All right, well, that seems fairly obvious, but it actually gets somewhat nuanced. We travel quite frequently and we go to different jurisdictions. Even within the state of California, there are radical differences in demographics between San Diego and Eureka. And if you have a concealed carry permit, well, you're able to carry a weapon in all of these different jurisdictions. Oftentimes, I will have students that will ask me these very intricate hypotheticals, right? If I'm standing on the corner at, a traffic light at 2 o'clock in the morning and there's a full moon and I've got the blood of a bat on my hands and somebody tries to attack me, am I authorized to use deadly force in this particular circumstance? And oftentimes I have to simply reply by saying, well, it really depends on what zip code you're in. The reality is that all criminal prosecutions take place through the lens of a political construct. Even though the same penal code is being used throughout the entire state, different district attorneys, who are elected representatives, are the ones making a decision whether or not they're going to move forward with filing a criminal complaint. And the sensibilities and the politics in one particular jurisdiction may be radically different from another jurisdiction. This puts us, what could best be described, in a morally ambiguous environment. It's one of the toughest things associated with this very concept of bearing arms outside of your home. As a result, in addition to knowing how to shoot, to knowing how to use less lethal tools, knowing how to use impact weapons, improvised weapons, flexible weapons, knowing how to use the soft skills necessary to avoid conflict to begin with, you also have to develop this sort of amorphous concept that we refer to as professionalism at arms. And professionalism at arms is not just a certain level of maturity. It's not just a certain level of stoicism. It's a deep-seated, continuous philosophical introspection as to what it is we're actually doing. The reality is that we all are involved in some form of a society, and that society has different concentric circles. The concept of defending your existence is probably the single most rugged, individualistic activity that a human being can engage in, the preservation of their very life. And yet, as I said, even though it's ruggedly individualistic, we still exist within a collective. It might be within the collective of our family. It might be within the collective of the Second Amendment community. It might be within the collective of society as a whole. Whenever we engage in any act or allow ourselves to become engaged in any act, we must ask two threshold questions. First and foremost, is what I am doing true? Is what I am doing necessary? Is what I am doing consistent with my underlying governing philosophy? And this is, depending upon the individual, somewhat of a sliding scale. But we have to first and foremost ask ourselves whether or not my actions actually are needed to begin with. Then we move on to the second level of analysis to determine whether or not our actions, if taken to their logical conclusion, ultimately benefit society. Another way of phrasing that, as the Stoics would say, is it beneficial to the cosmopolis? And again, that can be of varying degrees. It could be your family, it could be your neighborhood, it could be the Second Amendment community, it could be society as a whole. Are my actions ultimately, if successful, going to yield a benefit to society? Well, if I'm using some requisite level of force to prevent someone from engaging in a particular form of conduct, that might benefit me, but doesn't necessarily benefit society as a whole. To give you an example of this, this is a recent case that I was dealing with. We had an individual who was involved in a road rage incident. He was an elderly man who got cut off on the road by a younger man, a 27-year-old individual. And after being cut off, the client felt that the most appropriate thing to do would be to flip off the younger driver. Well, this ended up causing all sorts of emotional, disconnectedness and everything else. And the two started yelling at each other as they continued to drive down the road. At a certain point, the client decided that he was done having this conversation. He drew his firearm and showed the younger driver the gun. The younger driver immediately hit the brakes, pulled off to the side of the road. The client continued to drive on, and the younger driver ended up calling the police. And the client was charged with, in California, a 417 brandishing claim. It's a misdemeanor. Okay. Now, I will caution you, it is a misdemeanor that comes with it a legislative requirement that an individual convicted or pleading guilty to 417 serve a 90-day jail sentence. So there's a legitimate penalty associated with this. But I want you to think about for a moment the very concept that's taking place. Here we have an individual that is using their weapon as a means of asserting control over another individual. There's nothing to indicate that this person thought that there was an imminent likelihood of death or great bodily injury. Assuming the facts were in evidence that the client truly did believe that there was an imminent likelihood of death or great bodily injury, then they would have an affirmative defense to a brandishing charge. But those facts are absent. So what he's really trying to do is show this younger driver that he has more power than they do, that he's effectively trying to alter this driver's behavior. This is wholly unacceptable. Not only is it not necessary, but it actually brings disrepute to our Second Amendment community and potentially puts in jeopardy our ability to exercise these rights. It violates that second tenet of whether or not this ultimately benefits the cosmopolis. Soft skills would have prevented this incident from happening in the first place. Had the driver of the vehicle gotten cut off and simply maintained that certain level of maturity to simply pull back and let the younger driver drive off, there would have been no incident. There would have been no case. Now, by definition, I also wouldn't have gotten a pretty sizable paycheck as a result of it, but the fact of the matter remains, it would have ultimately been better. So soft skills are not just about avoiding conflict in its entirety. And sometimes you have no choice. Sometimes the conflict is foisted on you despite your best efforts. How can you prevent somebody from cutting you off? But how we react to that, that's equally important as a soft skill. We have to understand that it's critically important that there are times where we essentially just simply let things go for the benefit not only of ourselves, but of our entire society. Steve and JJ mentioned civil liability. Criminal culpability is something that I deal with all the time. It's the chief area of my practice. But when criminal culpability incurs, that's the state prosecuting you for a violation of a penal code. Civil liability is different. Civil liability allows an individual to effectively prosecute a case against you. Now, when there's a criminal component, your liberty is in jeopardy. When it's a civil component, then the damages that ultimately you're going to suffer is that of transfer of wealth. You're going to have to pay the plaintiff for the injury that they sustained. This is something that's also quite important because plaintiffs can oftentimes create fairly complex theories as to why your actions have caused them substantial injury. And if you are not hypercognizant, not only can you suffer a criminal prosecution, but you can ultimately end up going bankrupt. So these are the things that we need to be consistent about. The reality is, every one of us has the right to bear arms, and by extension, the right to preserve your very existence. All right, that is foundational to Western civilization. And yet, all rights come with responsibilities. With this unique right, the bearing of arms outside of your home, well, you have more than a simple responsibility. You have a moral mandate. You need to be training. You need to be training constantly, consistently, repetitively, and with purpose. And that training is not just limited to learning how to draw a firearm and deploy it on target in 1.5 seconds. It's not just about being able to survey a terrain and see where potential threats are going to be manifesting. It's that, but it's also understanding the deeper philosophical implications that come with being a rugged, individualistic individual, protecting themselves and protecting their families. Thank you. And Sandy, I'm going to turn this back over to you. I think we might have some questions that need to be addressed.
We sure do. Thank you, Steve, JJ, and Stephen for that insight. What we've heard tonight is a powerful and often overlooked truth. True safety isn't about being the toughest person in the room. It's about being the most aware. What we've learned, while we've learned that hard skills are a last resort, soft skills are a constant companion. They're the tools that you'll use every single day to detect, de-escalate, and disengage from potential threat. The ability to see what others miss is not a superpower. It's a skill. And like any other skill, it can be learned, practiced, and mastered. Guys, We're going to go ahead and take some questions now. I see one hand that's up in the participants box. So for those of you that have questions, please, this is a great time to start getting in line. And what we'll do is I will unmute your microphone and allow you to ask your question. And assuming that there is no follow-up question, I will go ahead and un or mute you back so that the next person can be queued up. Any questions so far? David, I'm going to have you start the conversation. David?
Mr. Ball? Well, he's unmuted. I will say that.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and let's see. David, I'm going to have you go ahead and figure out how to unmute yourself from your side. But Elizabeth, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for putting this seminar on.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah. What I would like to know is, say if you're out in traffic. Usually I try and ignore the aggressive drivers and people who are cutting me off. You know, who knows what they've got going on in their lives. It's not worth my getting involved. But what happens if they run me off the road and I have no way of escaping? Now, I do have a concealed carry permit. I also carry oil-based pepper spray. So what would be my options? Say if they're coming at me in my car.
Well, I'm gonna speak to this on a legal standpoint. I'll let Steve and JJ jump in from a defensive tactics standpoint. Um, so that physical act of running you off the road, I think could be seen as being objectively reasonable that there is an imminent likelihood of death or great bodily injury. This is more than simply a request that you pull over for a polite conversation. That is in and of itself a violent act, okay? And, again, I want to be cautious in saying this because, everything is fact dependent. I mean, did they really run you off the road, or is this a driver that's simply having a difficult time controlling their vehicle, or are they under the influence of narcotics? So, part of the ultimate test is whether or not they had any sort of intent and whether a reasonable person would see their actions as intending to run you off the road. Okay, so that's sort of a threshold, but I'm sort of taking it at face value that this was in fact a purposeful decision on the part of the other driver to force you off the road and prevent you from physically exiting your vehicle. Now, with that being said, in that situation, Elizabeth, have three separate weapons available to me. I've got my 45 ACP, I've got my pepper spray, and I've got a 2-ton automobile. This is a really big caliber, okay? And it also gives me potentially the ability to escape that situation. So, one of my favorite quotes came from Dave Grossman. If I'm in a school and I have an opportunity to shoot at a bad guy with a 9mm or a continuous belt-fed weapon system that has absolutely no chance of going depleted on ammunition, well, I'm going to upgrade. I'm going to take that. And many, especially older schools, have such a weapon system in almost every single hallway. It's called a fire hose. Okay, so given the opportunity to use my 9mm or a fire hose, I'm probably going to use the fire hose. So, we tend to get really sort of focused in and totemistic, frankly, on the tool that we think we have available to us. Sometimes the gun, sometimes the pepper spray may not actually be the most efficient weapon that's available. But, from a legal standpoint, I get pushed off to the side of the road aggressively by a driver that clearly is demonstrating that they want to do some form of physical violence to me. I'm probably going to decide that I have reached the threshold where some level of force is going to be necessary to protect myself. Steve, JJ, do you have anything you want to jump in on that?
Now, in this case, again, depends on that situation. Is it my car drivable? Can I drive my car? Something happened to my car? A lot of things going to be factor. If my car is still drivable, guess what? I'm just driving away, right? Now, there are a few videos that you can see the car when in front of another vehicle stopped. They tried to carjack him, and the driver just pushed the gas and rammed the driver's side door, and everybody jumped, and they just drove away, right? If my car I still can drive, for sure, I'm just gonna drive away at that point, right? I'm probably gonna have, if you have your stuff at your purse, I'm gonna have it close to me. You never know. Be ready. Probably gonna have my seatbelt open, just have more mobility, right? But if I can use my car to drive away, that's the first thing I'm gonna do. I'm gonna create distance, get out of there, more distance I can buy time. Now you might say, "Oh, am I gonna damage my car?" Now you're gonna kind of like wait in. What is more important to you? Get out of this situation that you might gonna get seriously bodily harm, or the death, or you just want to have some damage on your vehicle at that point that you can deal with your insurance later on, right? Because there's going to be a police report involved at that point, right? All depends on that situation. I don't know,
Yeah.
Mr. Tarani, if you want to.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with all of the above. And if you look at this from 30,000 feet, it's a series of constraints that determine your ultimate action. For example, Steve started with you have to first make the decision by gathering relevant information to what's going on around you, then make the decision, am I or am I not in a lethal threat environment? And then JJ went to the next, which is the best option, make space. More space equals more time equals more opportunity. And then you just keep going down from there. What options are no longer available to you at that moment in time?
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you guys. I'm going to go ahead and disable Elizabeth. I'm going to try David Ball again. Whoops.
Oh, we got Eric.
I clicked on the wrong person. Sorry, David. We'll get you in there.
Hello.
Hi, Eric.
Thank you for putting on this seminar. I think it's been amazingly good considering how short it is. And also thank you to Mr. Tarani. I've been a student of yours over at Gunsight for a while. And thank you again. My focus of my question tonight is directed to Mr. Lieberman. And I would like your opinion, sir, on attorneys on retainer, if you have heard of that service. As a California resident, I am always looking for ways to protect my substantial assets. And aside from avoiding things whenever I can and going that route, God forbid if I'm involved in something, the aftermath is something that I want to survive as well. From a financial standpoint and a legal standpoint as well, if you would comment. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so a couple of different things when it comes to that particular group, and actually there's now a couple of other law firms that have sort of adopted the same concept. So I'm not speaking specifically to attorneys on retainer. I'm talking about the whole concept of prepaid legal services as opposed to traditional insurance. So I want you to first of all think of your home, and you have homeowners insurance, okay?
Yes.
And as an attorney, I go to you and I say, Eric, okay, come on, man. You're paying $14,000 a year in homeowners insurance. That seems like a tremendous waste of money. Tell you what, pay me $5,000 a year. And in the event that you have any liability issues associated at all with your existence, I will represent you for that $5,000 a year fee. You don't need to pay for insurance anymore. And you say, that actually sounds like a pretty reasonable idea. So you cancel your insurance, you hire me, and lo and behold, somebody walking across your property falls and injures themselves and sues you for $200,000. Well, I am, because we have a contract, I am legally obligated to provide you my attorney services. And my attorney services are to negotiate a settlement so that you don't actually go to trial and potentially suffer a pretty substantial financial loss. So I go to you, Eric, and I say, congratulations. He was suing you for $200,000. Now I've been able to negotiate it down to $30,000. Eric, write him a check for 30 grand. And you're like, well, what do you mean write him a check for 30 grand? I thought you were taking care of that. No, 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 no. No, I'm not providing you any financial compensation. I'm just not charging you for my legal services. That's one of the major problems from a civil standpoint with prepaid legal services. They're not an insurance company. The other one, and this is the part that I find the most troubling, um, criminal defense, which is really where I focus my energy on, criminal defense is a very, very expensive proposition. Okay. We're hiring expert witnesses. We're hiring forensic experts. In fact, I'm less of Clarence Darrow waxing poetic in front of a jury. I'm really more of a project manager with a bunch of subcontractors underneath me. And those subcontractors need to get paid. And I'm not going to pay them out of my own pocket. Okay, I'm going to use insurance proceeds to pay for them. Well, assuming that that's been foreclosed because, you don't have insurance, well, I have no real other alternative than to try to petition the court to have the court go ahead and fund that. And some courts are going to be very reluctant. The other one, and this is a biggie too, whenever I go to a jurisdiction that I don't have intimate familiarity with, I'll use Fresno as an example. I've never litigated a case in Fresno, okay? I always bring in local counsel because, quite frankly, the local counsel there, they know where the bodies are buried, okay? They know how to off-ramp a case prior to it going to trial. Attorneys on retainer and other groups like this, they don't have the financial capability to sit there and bring on multiple attorneys. So whether you go with CCW Safe or a USCCA, or it's usually about 4 or 5 different insurance companies that are out there. Full disclosure, I'm a named attorney on all of them. Okay, so I don't really have a dog in the hunt, so to speak. I think that from a product standpoint, I think that the insurance companies provide a far more robust product. The one thing that I do not like, and this is what I will call out attorneys on retainer directly, the one thing that I do not like about them is that they have made statements on their YouTube videos that if you are charged with a crime, then the insurance companies will drop you. That is not only factually inaccurate. If they had made that statement as California lawyers, which they're not, they could be disbarred or at a bare minimum sanctioned by the bar for making that statement. That is just absolutely incorrect. I will tell you anecdotally, I've had 41 cases that USCCA has insured. And in all 41 cases, USCCA has paid like that. It's been instantaneous. They've been absolutely wonderful. Now, obviously, I can't say that for every single case across the country, but the cases that I've had, they've been wonderful. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so I will take that into consideration because I'm always looking, I review my policies. So I have a $5 million umbrella on my homeowners autos. Is that something, is
It's
that a
probably
wise
actually
idea?
not going to be sufficient. Most
Okay.
umbrellas, and I would have to actually look at your specific umbrella policy,
Hmm.
but about 99% of umbrella policies that are secondarily insured through Lloyd's of London specifically exclude use of force as a covered item. So you'd really need to look at the omissions on that one. That
Okay,
is,
so I
so
need to,
that
yeah.
that is specifically why the self-defense insurance uh, industry developed because of those exclusions. I can see Sandy vibrating because I know we're getting towards the end here.
We sure are. And I hate to do this, but I'm going to disable Eric there. Guys, my job tonight is to
Oh,
make
and
sure
she
that
and on top of everything else, yeah, there we go.
Hey, my job tonight is to make sure that we stay on track and on time. We've got 1 minute left before we all turn into pumpkins. So, guys, if you have legal questions, every Tuesday afternoon from 4 to 5, Stephen offers a free legal office hour, for lack of a better word, via Zoom. You guys are welcome to join in. Just all you need to do is go on to our calendar, register, and you'll get a link that afternoon saying, here's where we're meeting today. And you guys can bring all those questions to him. I see that Kay Lance is still here. Guys, would you mind if we took one more question before we call it a day?
As long as we can, sure.
Let's do it. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I think what I did was I hung up on him.
Well, there we go. So,
Kay
Sandy,
Lance, if you're still interested, raise that hand back up and I will
there
get
he
you.
is. He
There
did.
he is. All right. Sorry, guys. I am still learning how to do this. Allowed to talk.
There we go.
All right. Now you just have to unmute yourself.
Hi, folks. I'm sorry for the holdup. This was outstanding. I very much appreciated it.
Thank
My
you.
previous question was in regards to domestic violence survivors. And, everything that we've talked about, again, outstanding information. When we talk about kind of instantaneous moments, whether you're in a car, in a bar, out in the street, that kind of scenario taking place. But, as we all know, and I don't mean this to sound like, political, but what I'm saying is we know we have a pretty significant problem with domestic violence and domestic assault in the country. 1 in 4 women will be abused or assaulted. And I'm just wondering, how would you take one of them through their progression, since that that the soft skill part that they may have been trying to use, and I completely agree with that progression. They've probably been trying that for days, months, weeks, years, and haven't gotten anywhere, to the point where they need to go to their more lethal option, whether it's a knife or a gun, God forbid. And then they get, spilled over into the legal system, where most times they're really not, more times than not, the decision goes the other way. I think you understand where I'm going with that. I don't mean to take up a bunch of your time, but that was the reason for my previous question.
I think this is actually a much bigger question to address. I don't
Agreed.
think we're able to do so
Understood.
even in the 5 minutes that we could go over. So I think it's something that we'll keep in the articular file, and maybe as we go through, and our goal is to answer all the questions that are still in the Q&A box before we end our session. So we're going to let all of you guys go, but I think we're going to go ahead and save these questions so that we can address them separately or in an email, or maybe trickle them out through blogs or something like that, because I think you guys asked some very pertinent questions. It's unfortunate that we only have an hour to do this in, but again, this is just a precursor to what we're doing in April. Guys, I shared the dates. It's April 11 and 12 at the Hilton in Costa Mesa. We do have a block of rooms set aside. If you call up and ask for, I think, Artemis Defense Institute's rate, they will give it to you at a discount. While I'm here, for those of you that aren't going to be able to show up, or you want to get to understand your soft skills a little bit better, this is Steve Tarani's book. Now, this is the old book. I don't have his new book yet. But if you go to Amazon, you guys can find that there. You can find The Sword and Quill that they jointly wrote on Amazon if you guys can't wait. Otherwise, those two